everybody, how's it going? This is Jon Ruben here at Cin City SI on Twitter, and this is episode 3 of PicksCity University. And in this episode, we're going to cover what is a money line and what is a total. My guest, as always, is Jack Robinson. Jack, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. You can follow Jack at Jack_WMF, and as we learned in episode 2, that stands for the White Morgan Freeman, because when Jack Robinson speaks, everybody listens. I don't have such a creative name for myself, so you're just going to have to go with Jack on this one.
It's the professor, right? The Professor Jon Ruben.
I'll take that. Hey, it beats me in Gilligan. I'll take that anytime. So with that in mind, we are going to go to episode 3 again. This is really a double episode, but both topics are really pretty simple when we've covered the main 2 things already as far as what is the spread and what is the juice. Episode 3, again, is what is the money line and what is a total. So really quick, the money line, just in its very simplest terms, who's going to win the game? Period. No point spread, nothing. Who's going to win at the end of the day? That is it. Jack, you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, man. Who's just going to win the game? Who's going to lose the game? Money lines is a very simple bet, and so you take spreads out of the equation, you take all the different stuff out of the equation, and you're just going to play who's going to win. So if you're a big fan of one team and you want to bet on that team, you can just take them on the money line. And the money lines are always going to be set up as favorites and as underdogs. If you're going to take the favorite, then the favorite, you're going to have to pay a little bit more money to play them. Or if you're going to take the underdog, you play a little bit of money, and maybe you can win a whole bunch of money. I mean, who knows? So that's a money line bet, and it's a straight up win loss. So either you're going to win or you're going to lose. There's nothing else. There's nothing. There's no other restrictions or different things in there. So
it's as simple as it could possibly get. Really an extension of what is the juice episode 2 video that we did. In that, if you're going to bet the favorite to win the game, as you mentioned earlier, Jack, you're going to have to pay a little bit extra money. So on the favorites on the money line, you're going to see that minus sign. Let's just say, for example, you like a certain team and they are favored on the money line minus 150. That means that you're going to have to risk $150 to win 100, or again, as we mentioned in the juice episode, just 1.5 times whatever you want to win back. Correct?
Correct.
Now, for an underdog bet, again, as we talked about in the juice episode, you will have to risk $100 in order to win whatever it might be. If we use the example that we had at minus 150, then an underdog is probably going to be about plus 130 or thereabouts. So that means you'd have to risk $100 to win $130, to profit $130, because you're going to get that original $100 back. That's
right. Yeah,
right.
And then a lot of people that are looking at underdog bets, you're going to be, people that want to take risks, and that's what it says for. It's all risk based. So a lot of people, just the general public, looks at the plus money side of it and say you're going to bet $100 to win, $200. That's what they think is that's what they think is a good bet, when it's really not. So something to pay attention to.
Absolutely, and depending on the sport, there are going to be situations where it may be to your advantage to take a money line bet instead of a spread bet. I'll give you an example in football, for example. If I see that a favorite is laying 2.5 points on the spread, I'm just going to say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just forego the spread and just take them to win the game straight up, because my nerves kick in, especially in football, when a team is favored by 2.5, and then I'm afraid that they're going to win by just 1 or 2 and then not cover. That bit me more times than I can count. And so, you're going to have to lay a little bit extra juice, minus 125, minus 130 on the money line, as opposed to just doing the spread minus 2.5 points and then laying minus 110. But to me, it's worth that extra 15 or 20 cents in juice in order to have that peace of mind knowing that your team just has to win the game.
Yeah, it's just about getting the insurance. So it's basically you're buying those points. So basically you're buying the points. So you're taking the points out of the equation at that So basically, if you're going to be looking at a team, say if you want to forego the points, if it's within, I'm going to say if it's within 3.5 points, okay. So you want to basically play the money line instead of the spread. That's 2 or 3 or 3.5 because you don't want to get beat by those hooks. You want to take the team that's going to win heads up at that point.
So we're talking about the four major North American sports in football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. But let's look across the pond and other sports that might be popular in other parts of the world. And let's take soccer, for example, because here's another one where, yes, you can bet on a point spread of sorts, and you can also bet on the money line, but this is going to look a little bit different in soccer. How is that, Jack?
So in soccer, you have what's called a three-way money line. So what a three-way money line is you have the favorite, you have the underdog, and then you can also bet on the draw. So in soccer, a lot of times when they play those 90 minutes and they have the overtime minutes, there's not always necessarily a winner or loser. There's a lot of draws in soccer. So that's why Vegas and the odds makers and a lot of your bookies, they have those three-way money lines so that people can bet on the draw as well as the winner or the loser.
That's right. And to draw a parallel and kind of put a bow on this, going back to the beginning of our conversation with football, particularly NFL football, over the last few years, we've seen a lot more ties than usual. So let's just say, for example, in NFL football, you were to bet on the money line for either side. Let's just take the underdog plus 130, for example. Right. And that game ended up being a tie after overtime. Well, that would amount to being a push in football. In soccer, that would be a loss if you took the dog on the three-way money line and it ended up being a draw. You would lose that bet. So you're going to have to be careful when making those bets. You can go in and look for derivative bets like draw no bet, which effectively is the same thing, where if it does draw, then you get your money back. But the most basic three-way money lines that you'll see in soccer, if you bet a favorite or a dog and it ends up being a draw, you're going to lose. So be aware of that.
Yep, that's correct. And you always got to be aware of like what you're doing, and as you're betting, what you're looking at when you're betting on these games. So if you're looking at a team, the last 4 games have been draws. So that draw money is going to be a little bit more juiced than it typically would on a regular game, just because either if one or two of the teams have been on a draw streak.
So soccer's a little bit unique in that depending on where teams fall in the standings, they would be perfectly content settling for a draw. They don't necessarily have to push for a win. Now, full disclosure, I am not a soccer expert, but I know this to be the case in certain leagues and certain situations. So be aware, depending on the league that you're betting and the team that you're betting on, that if they don't have an incentive to win, if they would be content with the draw, just be aware of that before making your bet.
100%. I agree with you there.
So moving on from the money line, which I think we've covered pretty well, we'll move on now to what is a total, or in other words, it's also known as the over-under. So this is pretty simple. You take both teams, how many points, goals, or runs, depending on the sport, how many are they going to combine to score? And is it going to go over that total or under that total? That's pretty much it. There is juice that you need to be aware of course, on the totals as well. And Jack, we should also talk about beware of overtime when it comes to totals. What say you?
Once it goes to overtime, you might as well flip a coin. Okay, so it's basically at that point your bet's blown up, because when it goes to overtime, whatever the game spread, whatever the game total was, you might as well throw it out the window, because you don't know what these guys are going to do in overtime. Just kind of touch on that a little bit.
Well, if you had an under ticket and the game goes to overtime, then yeah, in most cases, in the overwhelming majority of cases, you can go ahead and throw that ticket out, because that's going to be nothing but garbage. Now, if you took the over and regulation ends without the total having gone over, but it goes to overtime, then you're in luck, because you have new life. Same thing if you took a favorite to cover the spread I know we're talking about totals here, but as it relates to overtime, if you took a favorite to cover the spread and the game ends up going to overtime, congratulations, you have new life. Your ticket's not dead yet. Now, for me, I primarily bet baseball more than any other sport. And so when I look at totals, I like to look at going over if the base number of the total is 8 or 8.5. Because if the ninth inning ends and scores 4-4, guess what? It's guaranteed to go over. There is no tie in baseball. Same sort of thing in hockey. If you have a total that is 6 or 6.5, then you want to look at possibly, depending on the teams and the situation, but you want to lean to the over, because if regulation ends and it's 3-3, you're guaranteed to go over. In hockey now, with the shootout rules, there are no ties anymore, so you're guaranteed to go over. Now, looking at other sports, in the NFL, it's possible that your under ticket still could cash because you're only going to get one more score in all likelihood. You could have field goal, and a third score possibly with the new NFL rules. In college, forget it. That game is going over every single time if it goes to overtime.
Right.
So be wary of that. If you have a close point spread and it's more likely then to go to overtime, then be aware of that when you make your over-under bet.
Right. And, and follow up a little bit what you said on, about baseball. So if you're betting on a baseball game, all right, so the cookie cutter over-under total on a baseball game is always going to be 8.5. Okay. It's always going to be 8.5. So, and then Vegas will adjust those lines based on where the tickets are going, based on where the money's going, if it's going up, if it's going down. So if, say, you have two ace pitchers out there, say you have, say Jack Flaherty and Chris Sale out there pitching, right? So that total is going to drop. So if say that total opens at 8, it's going to probably drop to 7.5 or so. Right. But if you're looking at another team, say I'm going to say the Colorado Rockies, right? So the Colorado Rockies play at Coors Field. There's always tons of runs being put up at that field. So and don't even be surprised if you see a total there at 12.5.
You just never know. In Wrigley Field, you got to pay attention to where the wind is blowing. If it's blowing out, it's Coors Field East. If the wind's blowing in, forget it. You might as well be watching a soccer game because it's going to be 1-0 or 2-0.
Right. Yeah, but that's something to pay attention to whenever you're betting on the totals as well. And then we're actually going to get into a little bit of the team totals as well. As something that I specialize a lot in is team totals. And so whenever I'm looking at a team total, I'm going to be looking at the starting pitchers that are coming out. So if I'm looking at a pitcher, that's a gas can. So a gas can is pretty good terminology for us as sports handicappers. We like to use that term a whole lot. Trash cans, gas cans, guys that give up a whole bunch of runs. So we look at those guys that are coming in, especially last 3 or 4 games. If they've given up 10, 11, 12 runs in the last 3 or 4 games, we're going to be looking at those. We're going to be looking at those team totals. So when you're looking at team totals, you're also looking at seeing what it is based off. So the team totals are going to be based off whatever the full game total is. So say if the game's 8.5, so the full game total is 8.5. So the team that you're looking at based on the favorites and underdogs is going to be 4.5. 5.5-ish. Dodgers get a lot of these 5.5 type run team totals just because they hit the ball a lot. Dodgers, Astros, Tampa Bay Devil Rays, teams that put up a whole bunch of runs, they're usually juiced on the numbers with the team totals, and you're also going to have to pay attention to what the vig is on that too. Pay attention to the juices because a lot of times you're going to catch Dodgers at -5.5, at -140 or -145, especially if they're going against a really bad pitcher. That has been happening recently.
Yeah, and to kind of put a bow on this one here, Jack, I'd be careful about using the term trash cans when you're wearing a Houston Astros hat because that might get somebody in trouble at some point. But that's neither here nor there. But to your point, yes, when it comes to team totals, when it comes to totals of any kind, look at the juice because there's juice on the totals also. In baseball, it's going to vary greatly because, let's face it, there are fewer runs scored in baseball than there are points scored in football. So the juice on a football total will usually be -110, -115. But in baseball, it can vary widely, anywhere from even money or even +105 to -130, depending on the situation. So just be aware of that when you're making your totals bets. And that basically wraps up episode 3. Like I said, it was going to be pretty simple because it's just an extension of the first 2 episodes. And episode 4, we're going to get into what are parlays, and then by extension, what are teasers. So let's just say we're teasing the teaser episode, and that you will have here in short order. Jack, any parting words?
The only one thing I will touch on, one more thing before we get off here, is whenever you're looking at these totals, they're always going to be, the totals more than likely are going to be based off of, especially in football and basketball, they're going to be based off of key numbers. So when you're looking at key numbers, we can get into that in a future episode, but it's always going to be in increments of 10, like say 10, 13, 17, 21, 24, 28, 31, so 34. You're going to be looking at, so when in baseball, or I'm sorry, in football, the score is always going to land on one of these numbers for the most part. So that's also something to be conscious of whenever you're looking at these games. So if you see a total that's kind of out of whack, if it's only like 26 and a half or 26 or something like that, it's the number's off. So it's not falling into a key number, but we'll get into that in a future episode.
You're referring to team totals of 26, not a full game total of 26. Because if that were the case, I'd be betting over every single time.
Right. No, I'm just saying that number in general. Those numbers in general. Yeah.
I get you. But you're right. Key numbers is something that is especially important when it comes to spreads, and then to some degree with totals as well. Certainly, again, baseball. I think we just mentioned that 8.5. You want to possibly look toward over. Whereas if it's 9, then it goes 4-4, and then you get an extra run and extra innings. The worst you're going to do is a push. So just be conscious of that. Be conscious of the juice. Be conscious of why the teams may go over or under. And if you don't like both teams combined to go over or under a certain total, then look at the team totals to take the other team out of the equation. So with that, Jack, thanks for joining again, Jack_WMF. You can follow both of us at PickCity, PicksCity, at PicksCity.com. You can choose from dozens of different handicappers that do all of this stuff all the time. I can't say 24/7 because they got to sleep sometime, but whenever they're awake, pretty much this is what we're doing. I can certainly say that for myself. Jack, you specialize in team totals. You specialize in baseball team totals especially, because I know you like looking at those pitching matchups and how the teams hit them. So, again, that's just one example, but we have dozens of cappers at PickCity.com that specialize in different things. So when you go there, look at what sport you really want to focus on. Of course, football is coming up, and look at what they specialize in. Look at their track record. Chat with them, get to know them before you make a pick, and build a rapport with them so that you understand that it's a real person on the other end of this and not just some bot or some algorithm just spitting picks out to you. These are real people, and I can tell you from experience, these are genuinely good, honest people. So, Jack, anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much hit everything on the head, man. Like you said, we have handicappers from all over the world. Like and subscribe us on YouTube, and keep following along with the PickCity University. Here in the future, we're going to get some of our handicappers that are on our site, some of their shows that they're doing. We're going to get those onto the PickCity platform as well. So, like I said, just subscribe, follow, and just we're always out here to try to win some money.
Yeah, like, share, subscribe, and tell a friend, tell a buddy, tell a friend, bring your brother, bring your uncle, bring your sister. It's okay. We can all do this together. On that note, I'm Jon Ruben at Cin City SI, and we will see you in episode 4. Thanks for watching.
See you.